Hi there and welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're making Asian lettuce wraps. I absolutely love these. But when we go out to eat them, I often find that they are just saturated in oil. And sometimes I've had to actually tip my bowl and put a knife under the edge of the bowl to let some of the oil run off so I could eat them. So when I make them without any added oil. And I've come to realize if I eat something that is saturated in oil, that oil coats my tongue, and I find that I need to add more salt and more spices to really get the flavor. By omitting that oil, it really helps punch those spices forward. This is super easy to put together. Now, I know it may look like I have a lot of ingredients laid out here. My husband and I are getting ready to go out of town, and I absolutely hate to waste groceries. So before we go somewhere, I always open the fridge and I do what we call eating down the groceries. And I look at what I have and I just think, how can I use this over the next couple of days and make some really delicious food and not throw away any groceries? So when I opened the fridge, I had a little bit of celery, there was an onion, I found a bag of frozen shelled edamame, a few little sad carrots, but they'll work great. I had a few mushrooms, a couple hot peppers. I'm out of garlic, so I'm using the jarred garlic. I had a can of water chestnuts in the pantry and some soy curls. And soy curls are what we use in place of chicken or beef. And they're made from just pure soy, and they come dried. And if you want a recipe on how I use soy curls and how I process my soy curls, let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to do that. Like I said, you don't have to have all these ingredients. Open your refrigerator and see what you've got, and any crunchy vegetable will work. For the seasoning, you'll want a little bit of soy sauce and teriyaki sauce, and I'm talking about the liquid kind, not the syrupy type. I like a little bit of sweet in my Asian lettuce wraps, so I'm going to put in a drizzle of agave and 5 spice. And 5 spice is on the spice aisle, and it is just an Asian blend that has some warm spices, and this really kicks that up a notch. And this is what makes those Asian wraps delicious. If you can find this, I highly recommend it. I had a few optional spices when I looked in my pantry. I had some sesame seeds, the blonde and the black, so I'm going to throw those in, and a little bit of cayenne pepper. And then we'll want some lettuce for the wraps, and that's really all we need. I also have some rice. Now, I batch cook my rice and I put it in the freezer. So I just grabbed a bag out and we'll go ahead and toss that in a skillet. I'm just going to start with my celery, and I just like to cut it long ways and just chop it into kind of uniform sized pieces. And I'm just keeping everything on my cutting board. I'll just push that aside. Next, let's chop that onion. Now you can use a yellow onion or a white onion. Just use whatever you have. And we'll move on now to the carrot. Like I mentioned, you don't have to use a carrot, just use whatever you have in your fridge. And I like to kind of cut my carrot in uniform pieces, similar to the size of the celery. I love the color that is added to these lettuce wraps from the carrots. This end's really skinny, so I'm just cutting it in half. And then I'll quarter this larger end. And if you're not one to have a lot of produce left over in your refrigerator, but you're craving these lettuce wraps, then by all means, if you want to do a really quick approach, you can buy the pre-chopped veggies in the produce section of your grocery store. I just realized I have a mirepoix here. The trifecta of cooking: the onions, celery, and the carrots. That's just strictly a coincidence. Okay, I'll chop up those hot peppers next. I always like to test the heat level on my hot peppers, and I'm hoping these aren't too hot because I really want to use them both up. So I always cut my pepper in half, and then I just take a spoon and I scrape out the seeds and the membrane. Remember, the seeds have the heat, but the membrane holds the heat. So you want to go ahead and scrape out that white membrane. That's got some kick. I'm going for it. And the last veggie is our mushrooms. I always cut the stem off, and then I just slice through the cap 2 or 3 times depending on how big the mushroom is, and down through it. Now I know a lot of chefs say that washing a mushroom is like a cardinal sin, but about, oh gosh, it was probably 30 years ago, I was watching, I think it was Alton Brown on his show Good Eats, and he was talking about whether or not you should wash a mushroom. So he weighed some mushrooms and brushed them dry to clean them. And then he weighed out the same amount of mushrooms, and he quickly washed them underwater, just very, very briefly, and then put them on a paper towel. And the amount of water they held was so minuscule. I think it was not, I mean, maybe a gram or 2 for this bunch of mushrooms. And so I thought, okay, from now on, I'm giving my mushrooms a rinse, because they do have some dirt on them when they're grown, and I just don't like any grit from that. So I give them a good wash, but you do it however you want to do it. So I've put my pan over a high flame, and I want to get my pan nice and hot so I can saute my veggies. And I know this looks like a lot of mushrooms, but these cook down, so it will be really just a great amount having these Asian lettuce wraps. I'm not adding any oil to my pan. I'm gonna splash a drop of water in there, make sure it's hot enough, and the water's dancing, so I'm gonna toss my veggies in. And because so much water cooks out of mushrooms, I'm starting with the mushrooms, and I want those to cook down, and then we'll just throw everything else in. And I'm going to start to move these around a little bit. And they'll begin to stick, so I'm going to splash in just a little bit of water. I don't want to put too much water in because so much moisture is going to cook out of those mushrooms. Now, anytime I want to expedite the weeping of a vegetable, I will sometimes toss just a pinch of salt in, but I'm going to splash in a little bit of my soy sauce. And soy sauce is very high in sodium, and that's going to really speed up the process of weeping these mushrooms and getting them to reduce. These have cooked down nicely, and I've got a little bit of liquid left over from the soy sauce, so let's just put everything else in the skillet. This is like a stir fry, not a saute like you would do when you're making a soup or something. So I want to keep my pan pretty dry and not add any water, and just cook these vegetables until they're crisp tender. I like a little bit of crunch in my lettuce wraps. My veggies are perfect, just the right amount of crunch for us. I chopped up this can of water chestnuts, and you can buy them chopped, but I had sliced, so I just dumped them out on my cutting board and gave them a quick chop. I'm tossing in my soy curls, and like I mentioned, that's optional. Pretty much every ingredient here is optional, with the exception of your soy sauce and your teriyaki. My edamame, and I'm using about half this bag, and I'll just put that back in the freezer. This is so colorful, it's beautiful. And this is when I add my spices because I want them to bloom a little bit. So let's toss those in. It's my cayenne pepper, my blonde and black sesame seeds, and my 5 spice. And an empty bowl. I don't know why that's there, but I didn't miss anything. Next, I'll add the rice. And I'm making a big batch of this because we'll eat it for a couple of days. And it's really a nutrient-packed meal. And last but not least, garlic. I always like to keep a little jar of garlic in the refrigerator. It keeps a long time. That way I'm not caught off guard if I'm making something and I want to put garlic in it, but I may not have any fresh garlic, so it's nice to have. With my flame still on high, my rice begins to stick just a little bit, and I'll add some teriyaki. And teriyaki is not as salty as soy sauce. And because when I make this, I'm usually using just random vegetables, I like to taste it and see if I need to adjust any of my seasonings. So let me see where we are. That's really good. I want a little bit more teriyaki. And I'm going to add just a little bit more of the Asian 5 spice. Another quick taste. That's great. All right, I'll just turn off this heat and this is ready to serve. This is really beautiful. It's lunchtime here and I'm hungry, so I can't wait to give this a try. I just washed some romaine leaves, and I really urge you to wash all your lettuce before you eat it because it can get pretty dirty when it's grown in those fields. And I really love this with my Asian dipping sauce. I don't buy any Asian sauces in the store anymore because I can't find them not filled with a lot of high fructose corn syrup and sugar, so I make my own. And if you want the recipe for my sauce, just click the link below because I have a maki roll recipe, and in that video I make this sauce. That is so delicious. The crunchiness of the lettuce and that rice mixture, oh my goodness. Now, eating lettuce wraps can sometimes be a little messy. I like to eat them this way. My husband prefers it in a bowl. So I'll just chop my romaine lettuce and make a ring, and then I'll spoon the rice mixture into the center. I don't want to put it right on top of my lettuce because the heat will wilt the lettuce, but by spooning this into the middle, the lettuce stays nice and crunchy, and the cold lettuce does not cool off the dish. And I'll just drizzle a little bit of the sauce on the lettuce and on my rice mixture, and that's ready to serve. This recipe is a great way to use those random vegetables that are hanging out in your refrigerator. I really hope you give this recipe a try. If you enjoyed our time together, please click the like and subscribe so you won't miss the next recipe, and I'll see you then.